much for coming out and spending a little time. I wish we could take this outside. If I was a teacher, I'd say, come on, class. Thank you.
It's okay, I'm mobile. I can
How
follow.
many of you are seeing me for the first time? Oh, wow. Okay. Then I'm going to tell you about me. I didn't want to waste your time if you've been here before. Thank you. That means a lot to me that you take time to come out and say hi. So I'll tell you a little about me, tell you why I'm doing this, tell you what I've learned so far, and because I believe representation begins with listening, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to know what's on your minds. I know some of you have written some questions on cards. I know one of my associates will be walking around too. And if you have anything you want to ask, by all means, put it in the bucket, and I'd love to do so. And I don't care if you're a Democrat, a Republican, a Libertarian, an Independent, anything in between. I love you all. And I'm running for Congress to remind people that this is about representing everybody. And to do so, I want to hear from everybody. I want people to take their lapel pins off and set down their partisan swords, if you will, and come back together and do what we're supposed to do, which is generate conversation, listen to one another. Doesn't mean we always have to disagree, but we can do so without being disagreeable. And I got to tell you, I started this endeavor out of a little bit of anxiety, but it has been converted to hopefulness and optimism in a way that I never imagined possible. And I hope you leave here tonight just a little bit more optimistic than you came in, because there's a lot of good reason to do so. So with that said, I was born on Richard Nixon's first inauguration day, which is all you need to know. I'm ready for Congress. Who would have thunk it 50 years later, but here we go again. My parents, Dee Dee and Artie, met at St. Paul Central High School in the early 1960s. My dad, Artie, grew up quite poor in St. Paul. My grandfather, Victor, died when he was 10 years old, so my grandma Ruth raised him as a single mother. She worked at the Highland Village, worked at the Kohl's department store in the Highland Village to make ends meet. And after high school, Artie wanted to attend the University of Minnesota, but couldn't afford it. So he earned an ROTC scholarship, and he was sent to Vietnam 2 months before I was born as a captain in the U.S. Army. And he was killed in action when I was 6 months old, in July of 1969. My mother was 24 and widowed, and we moved in with my great-grandparents for the first 2.5 years of my life. And that's how life began for me. And when I was about 3, my mom remarried a remarkable man named Eddie Phillips, who adopted me and into an extraordinary family, filled with many blessings in business and philanthropy and community service. And some of you might know that my adopted grandma was the advice columnist, Dear Abby. I get that reaction every time. Strangely enough, I'm actually here to ask for your advice, not give any. But as a young boy, I would visit her in a beautiful home in California, and my grandma Ruth in a public housing apartment building in St. Paul. And that disparity really bothered me as a young guy. And now as a 49-year-old father of 2 daughters myself, I can tell you that those disparities trouble me even more, because they have not narrowed in the last 50 years, they have only expanded. And that in no small way illuminates why I'm running for Congress. When I was a little boy, we moved to Edina. I went to Edina Highland School. Any teachers in the audience tonight? Yay, thank you. I want to hear from you a little later. I went to Edina Highlands as a boy. I was raised in a household. My parents demanded hard work, taught me to judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin, and taught me to measure success not by how much we collect, rather by how much we share. And those were the core principles of growing up in my household. And I worked hard as a young guy. My first job at age 14 was downtown at Runyon's. Anybody know Runyon's in downtown Minneapolis? I probably cleared some of your chicken wings. I was a busboy and a bar back, and on Sunday mornings, I would show up at work at about 8 a.m., and Paul Runyon would hand me a white towel and put me up on a ladder, and I had to clean every one of those 100 or so picture frames that were on the walls of Runyon's. And it was the first time I thought about public policy, because I thought to myself, if every 14-year-old in this country had this job, there would be no more teenage smoking. because what I removed, this is back in the days where you could smoke in restaurants and bars, what I removed with that white towel from those picture frames, I will never, ever forget. The next year, I opened my very first business at age 15, 16, a mobile car wash service. A business I might return to if this run for Congress doesn't work out. And I think it's going to be. And I love to explore. I love to learn. I worked at Dane Bosworth for a summer. I worked at an architectural firm because I love design. Then I interned in college with Senator Patrick Leahy, who was a U.S. Senator back in 1988 when I was an intern, and he's still a U.S. Senator. So if anybody wants to talk about perpetual incumbency or perhaps term limits, I'm happy to have that conversation tonight. I went to Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island for my college education. I came back here afterwards because I love Minnesota. And I went to my father and I said, I'm ready to work in our family business. And he said, no, you're not. He said, you got to make your mistakes elsewhere. So I said, okay. So I found a little business in the district in Edina called In Motion. We made bicycle apparel and equipment. We had an interesting technology. It was a liquid-filled bladder that we sewed into bicycle shorts. Any bicyclists in the audience? Okay, so a liquid-filled bladder to make your ride a little bit more comfortable. The only problem was they had a tendency to burst at the wrong time. So I learned a lot about quality control. But I worked there for 2 years. I went back to my father a couple years later, and I said, I think I'm ready to work in the business now. And he said, if you're willing to work twice as hard and earn half as much, we've got a place for you. And I said, bring it. And I went to work in our warehouse. I picked orders. Worked in our production department. So if any of you had a bottle of Phillips scotch that tasted strangely like peppermint schnapps, I apologize. And my favorite job at Phillips in that time was one that really prepared me for a run for Congress, and that was driving around 5 states, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, selling our products. And I went to every small town in the upper Midwest, and I got to meet amazing people, owners of small businesses that sold wine and spirits, and I listened and learned and illuminated a lot of the perspective that I bring to this race, to this very, very moment. And I worked hard. I went to business school on the weekends, eventually managed our international sales, and eventually was promoted to run the business. And in our family and in our companies, business is a means to an end. And the end is not making as much money as we possibly can. The end is taking as good a care of people that work for our businesses as we possibly can, and the communities in which we do business. And in fact, to this very day, on my desk, I keep a copy of our 1942 employee profit sharing plan, because it starts with employees. And after we sold Phillips, we made an investment in a little ice cream company called Talenti. Any Talenti gelato fans in the house? Yay! Any favorite flavors? Love it. Mine too. Salted. There's always a salted caramel fan. And I just want you Talenti fans to know that this our pint is the single serve size. Just one a night. That's all we ask for. And when my father passed away in 2011, I moved over from our spirits company to the ice cream business, and along with my partners, we built Talenti into the 3rd best-selling premium ice cream in America, and sold it to Unilever a couple of years ago, the owners of Ben&Jerry's. Shared success with all of our employees when we did so. And then a couple of years ago, I, with a couple partners, opened Penny's Coffee. We have 2 coffee shops, one in downtown Minneapolis and one in Linden Hills. A 3rd one on the way. Can't tell you exactly when and where, but it's coming. And you may have seen a certain person who's the incumbent running against me tell you some things about Penny's that are just frankly not true. We pay everybody a $15 minimum wage at Penny's because it's a principle of ours, not because it's easy and not because we have to. It's hard, but it's the right thing to do. And when it's a struggle for people, do you know the national federal minimum wage is $7.25? Can you imagine? $7.25 is our federal minimum. It's ridiculous. We pay $15, which is about 50% more than most coffee shops in town pay. And we do so because we want our employees to have a chance to succeed and have a livable wage. Healthcare is expensive. Housing is expensive. Transportation is expensive. It's complicated. And $15 is not the end-all be-all, but it sure as heck is a beginning. And that's what we try to do. And I'm proud of that fact, and that's my current business. But turning up the clock a little bit to November of 2016, I watched an election that November after voting, like many of you, and I was dismayed. I was dismayed about the tenor and tone of that entire election. I was shocked by its outcome, and I watched with my family that night, but particularly through the lens of my daughters, who were at that time 18 and 16 years old. And they were sad, they were angry, they were full of anxiety, and they cried, and it really affected me. And I woke up the next morning, and at the breakfast table, I promised them that I was going to do something. And that doing something turned into this run for Congress. Like many of you in the audience, I presume, perhaps not always politically engaged, there are millions around the country that finally recognize we have a responsibility to step up and participate. And I'm just one of them. But when I made that promise to my daughters, I didn't know how I would fulfill it. So I turned my attention to Eric Paulson. And I discovered quickly a man who talks like Jim Ramstad but votes like Michelle Bachmann.
Yes.
A man whose votes just simply don't match his quotes. Because on the surface, it seems like there's a lot that a lot of us agree with when it comes to Eric Paulson's rhetoric, but when it comes to his votes, what really matters, they're disconnected. And that's just the truth. And I came to realize that our Constitution anticipated a president like Donald Trump. But our Constitution did not anticipate a Congress filled with so many who lack courage. And he's the poster child for that. This is systematic. We have a Congress that is bought and sold. Special interest money, lobbyist money in Congress is corrupting this country. It is not unique to one party or the other. It just so happens that Eric Paulson is the sixth biggest taker of special interest money in the entire United States Congress of 435 people. The same man who in 1997 wrote legislation as a member of the Minnesota House that would have eliminated that same money from politics. And now he's the sixth biggest taker. But what really affected me and drove my decision to run was when he voted on the AHCA bill, the bill that would have stripped millions of people who had just finally received health insurance coverage through the ACA. It would have stripped them of their coverage. And I thought this was the most abhorrent bit of legislation that the U.S. House of Representatives had considered in a long time. And the fact that my representative voted for it, I thought was abhorrent. And I decided that was the day I'm going to do something. And I have never looked back, and I got to tell you, it's the most joyful journey of my entire life. And I'm proud to tell you that. And that's why I want you to leave a little bit more hopeful, because the people I've met in the last year and a half have been remarkable. The first thing I did is buy a little truck. You know, my little truck, who's wearing a sticker? Yes, there we go, thank you. I can't hold up. This little, oh, thank you, boy, you got every prop I need. Here's my little truck. You may have seen it outside a few minutes ago. It's called my government repair truck. And I bought it because I wanted people to start talking again. And I recognize in this day and age, Democrats tend to just want to talk to Democrats, Republicans just to Republicans. And I thought, you know what, in the 3rd District, let's try doing this differently. You know, this truck doesn't say what party I'm representing. This truck simply says government repair truck. And I open my service window and I serve coffee or lemonade, and people come and talk. And that's how I get to learn about what's important to people. And it's not always people I agree with. In fact, a lot of the times it's not. But when I was a kid, I was taught that if 2 people always agree, you only need one of them. So I learn, and I have fun doing that. And that's why you see this truck and me driving it all around the district, simply engaging people in conversation. And what I've learned is really a big epiphany, and this is why I'm hopeful. I've talked to thousands of people from all across the district and with all kinds of political perspectives. But at the end of the day, there is very little on which we disagree when it comes to the outcomes. You know, we all want cleaner air and cleaner water. We all want strong public schools for our kids. We all want better health care at a lower cost. We want safe neighborhoods and a secure country. You know, we want our tax dollars well used. We don't want bigger government. We want effective and efficient government. So I got thinking to myself, what's going on here? And of course, what's going on here is we have 2 political parties that thrive and survive by division. And I think we can do better. So that little truck is literally a vehicle to doing better. And I've discovered that I agree with most of the people in this district, which is, I think it's time for our country to make the moral decision, to ensure that every American has access to high quality, affordable health care when they need it. Everybody. We're the only developed nation in the world that chooses not to do so. And we have the money in the system. We spend twice as much as any nation, developed nation in the world on health care. Our outcomes are mid-pack. Healthcare consumes 17.5% of our entire economy. So I will make the argument to you that we already have the dollars in the system. It's just that too many of those dollars are enriching certain corporations and certain insurance companies and not doing what they should be doing, which is taking care of people. So I favor, first and foremost, because there are too many people who are an illness away from bankruptcy, too many people who can barely afford their insurance premiums, some people that don't even have insurance at all in our district still. So I think it's time that we set our sights on fixing the ACA. It is not perfect. It's not perfect. We have to fix it by stabilizing insurance markets, by reinsurance, which is easy to do if people would just come together and get the job done. I favor the notion of expanding Medicare as a buy-in option for people in this country. Not because I want it to be the only option. I want choices. I think if you have an employee-sponsored plan that works well for you, by all means, you should keep it. Or if you have a nonprofit plan that works for you, by all means. But there are too many people in this country that do not have a plan that works well for them, that they can afford, that they understand, that's accessible and available. And as a small business owner, nothing would make me happier than for our part-time employees to have Medicare as an option to buy into. And if they did so, and more people did, we'd have a stronger Medicare program that would, I favor something called Medicare Extra, that would force Medicare to negotiate our pharmaceutical pricing in this country. Because right now, every one of us, subsidizes the entire world's pharmaceutical pricing. And if we did so, we could save up to $230 billion. With a $230 billion over 10 years. And it would not put pharma companies out of business. In fact, if they would simply raise their pricing just a little bit to all the other countries in the world, they would do just as well, if not better. So I want to see that negotiated so we all save money and we can direct that into taking care of people. And then equally importantly, and something that nobody in Congress seems to talk about, is our care delivery model, the way that our system works. Because we do not have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system. We have incentives and reimbursements only for hospitalizing people and for running procedures on them. So as you all know, we operate on incentives. And if we simply switch the model, provide rewards for preventing illness, keeping people healthy, it would change everything. Our costs would drop. We would all lead healthier lives. And our system would be a much more significant and robust healthcare system. And we can do so. But I'm going to make the argument time and time again that the reason we aren't right now is because of special interest money in politics. I'm going to come back to that. Public education. To those of you who are teachers in this room, thank you. It's the most important profession, I believe, in this country. I believe it's time to enhance both the compensation and esteem for teachers. I believe it's time that we have a delegation of Democrats and Republicans that advocate for the fulfillment of our unfunded federal mandates. We have $147 million every year that the federal government has promised us in this very district to take care of our schools for special education funding that is unfulfilled. $147 million, which means every one of us in this room who lives in the 3rd district has to make up for that. And I also believe that money doesn't solve everything. I want to form a national retiree corps. People who have the time and interest to go into schools and support teachers in the classroom, help kids learn how to read and write, and give them hugs and high fives when they deserve it, go on field trips, share their life experience, and believe in kids. Because too many teachers that I speak with right here in our district are being challenged to do tasks that they're not well trained for, that they don't have the capacity to do. And we've got a wonderful, wonderful tens of millions of people in this country, if you will, that are available to help take care of our kids. And I want to see us become that kind of country. I want to talk about the environment. You know, we didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of rocks. We left the Stone Age because we came up with better ways to do things, and we have those ways. Unfortunately, we have a president that wants to take us backwards to the Stone Age. Wants to reinvest in coal, despite the fact that's like reinvesting in typewriter repair shops. Really. You know, we have wind and solar at our disposal only because we invested in them. Wind is the least expensive form of energy right now in this country. We simply need thoughtful incentives to migrate from fossil fuel production to renewable energies and take care of our water and our air, but it begins with believing in science. How many of you in this room believe in science? Thank you. I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat because it shouldn't matter what party you belong to. Science matters, facts matters, and if we can't believe in facts, then we're in big trouble. Women's rights and economic security and reproductive rights, and finally, ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment. We are one state. If there was ever a year to do so, I say it's this year, beginning on November 6th. I want to talk about gun violence and gun violence prevention. Yes. Talk about something that unifies this very district. I ask that you not refer to gun control, because the issue isn't gun control. The issue is how do we prevent gun violence? And that's how you start conversations. And I want to see us have universal background checks on every sale of a weapon in this country. 90% of this country agrees on it. I believe it's time for a return to the assault weapons ban. Most of this country agrees on that too. You can't carry a hand grenade or a bazooka or an automatic weapon in the street. Why should you carry a weapon that can cause mass human carnage in a matter of moments? I believe it's time for that. But I also believe it's time that we need mental health professionals in every single school in this country to take care of our kids, not just for gun violence prevention, but because mental health should be a parity with physical health, like Jim Ramstad and Paul Wellstone work so hard on. We also need anti-bullying programs in every school to prevent kids from acting so atrociously sometimes. We also need the Centers for Disease Control to do their job, which is to investigate why this is happening and make proposals to Congress as to how we can solve it. It's not rocket science. That's what we did in the 1960s and 70s when highway fatalities were increasing. And we didn't ban cars. We made them safer. We changed how roads were designed. We changed how lighting was designed on those roads. And the features inside of cars. We should look at gun violence the same way. Let's look at the causes and let's come together and get it done. But at the end of the day, you know, no matter what your number one issue is, I ask that your number two issue be campaign finance reform. Because every single thing I just spoke about will never be addressed, no matter how common sense it is, no matter how much of this country agrees. Because the money in politics has absolutely corrupted our Congress. We have a culture of corruption that is pervasive. It starts in the White House and filters all the way down. It's not unique to one party or the other, because both sides are guilty. And I am the only candidate in the country, and I shouldn't say this as a badge of honor, because this should be the norm, not the exception, but I take no money from PACs, no money from special interests, no money from federal lobbyists, and no money from members of Congress, because they also use money to influence votes. And I think we should have people that go to I'm a voter too, and I want to know that the people that I send to Washington are there to represent me, not the massive interests that finance campaigns. And this is not that hard to accomplish, but we have to demand that. And I'm going to make the argument to all of you that there's a lot more power in a room like this than there is in Congress to solve this problem, because if we all come together and start demanding change, it's going to happen. And the dirty secret is, as some of you might know, that candidates and members of Congress often spend a third to half of their time raising money. And I don't know about you, but I've never had a job that I would have kept in my entire life, that if I spent half of my time doing something outside of the responsibility of my job description, that I'd ever keep my job. So with the sixth biggest taker of special interest money now taking it as my opponent, I'd like to think that might be the case for him. Time for new employment. And that's true of a lot of members of Congress. We can do better. It's a matter of money, it's a matter of time, it's a matter of principles. And we got to get to work. Has anybody seen the movie Dark Money yet? I encourage you, good. What did you think?
Wonderful.
Yeah. Dark Money is playing in theaters now. I encourage you to see it, because we have got to expose the truth. And I'm a lonely voice right now, but something's changing, because the New York Times just covered our race and exposed what we're trying to do. It's a movie called Dark Money. It's in the theaters right now. It exposes the dirty truth about how money is affecting our entire political industry. So that's my hallmark issue, because I believe that has to be addressed before we can do anything else. And I might be a lonely voice in Congress, should I be so honored to serve all of you. But I'm not going there for the best office, and I'm not going there for the best committee assignment. I'm going there to expose truth. And it is awfully liberating to be able to do so, not being beholden to anybody but all of you. It's not that difficult. So the good news is this. I'm taking on a really difficult person to beat. He won by 14 points in 2016. He is financed by massive interests. He outsources his entire campaign to organizations like the Congressional Leadership Fund, literally, an outside interest group that established an office and does all of his dirty work in the district. This is a district that hasn't elected a Democrat since, anybody know? 1958. Last time someone served is 61. Yeah, his name is Roy Weir. And this is not easy, but here's the good news. We're up in the polls. Did anybody see that New York Times? But I ask all of you who might support this campaign to, let's pretend that poll showed us 9 points down, because that's how I feel. We have to work twice as hard over the next 57 days if we're going to win this thing, because being up 9 points in a poll against someone like Eric Paulson means one thing. They're going to bring a lot more money and a lot more mean-spiritedness, a lot more lies and a lot more nonsense to this district, and it's going to take a lot more work to combat that, because truth has got to prevail, and I have great faith in this district that it will. But I invite you to join this effort. Eric Paulson, I invited to sign the Minnesota Way Pledge 6 months ago, would have gotten rid of all the PAC money, all the special interest money, would have eliminated self-funding from this campaign, and would have eliminated all that outside spending that we're starting to see appear in this market right now. He chose not to sign it, even though he sponsored legislation that would have gotten rid of that money in 1997. He challenged Terry Bonoff in 2016 to sign the People's Pledge and get rid of the outside spending. For some reason, he didn't want to sign it this year. Despite that fact, I've only put $5,400 into my campaign, which is the same amount that every single one of you, if you wanted to or could afford to, would do in my campaign. Not a penny more, other than some use of my truck and my pontoon boat and my office. Because I believe that's how campaigns should be run. But I'm not going to do this with a hand tied behind my back, because we are going to beat Eric Paulson. We're going to bring change to Congress, and it is coming on November 6th. So thank you. I want to turn it over to you now for questions, and I want to be part of the U.S. House of Representatives, not the U.S. House of Politicians. So that means I will answer your questions directly and unabashedly. And lastly, I've invited Eric Paulson to come to every single one of these gatherings, every single one we've hosted. Throughout the entire district, we've had probably 100 of them so far. He has not yet accepted, but I ask that you encourage him to do so because I think that's how you represent the district, by simply appearing in front of people. That's the fun part. So thank you. When I look at that, there's a magic bucket with questions. All right. First question is, what is my position on mining in northern Minnesota? My position on mining is that I'm not opposed to all mining, because if I was opposed to all mining, that means we wouldn't have iPhones or automobiles. I am opposed to any mining or anything that might threaten one of the most valuable natural resources in this country and certainly in this state, and that's the boundary waters. So I'm opposed to any mining. The changes that the Trump administration just issued this week, I thought were abhorrent and a tremendous disservice to the state. You may have seen that Eric Paulson actually had the audacity to issue a press release saying that he calls on the administration to reverse some of those decisions. Well, I would argue that when you're a member of Congress and have been so for 10 years, you're in the majority party and your same party controls the White House, leadership means you prevent that from happening in the first place. I'm opposed to anything that has any risk whatsoever of affecting the boundary waters, and I take things a step further. Anytime there's an issue, I look at both sides. I do my own due diligence. I don't rely on lobbyists who will never finance my campaigns. And I've come to the conclusion that the technology that is proposed to ensure that water use in that type of mining, as you well know, I don't have faith in it yet. And there's no documented evidence that it works, and I don't want Minnesota to be the test bed. If it's proven someday, somehow, then so be it. But it is not, and we should not be the guinea pig for that. That's how I feel. Next question. I know Bloomington is on the east end of your district, but we would sure like to see more of you. Well, thank you, Bloomington. You know, I know it's hard to stay in touch on a daily basis. I have been to Bloomington a lot. I'm not sure who wrote the question, but I've been to Bloomington a lot. I will be, in fact, I was just there, I think 3 nights ago. I've been there a lot. I'll be back a lot. But I'm trying to do something quite differently because, oh, did you ask the question?
Yes, I asked the question, and how do we know that
Yes.
you're there 3 nights ago? Because I've been looking very closely at where I can come and hear you speak.
So, are you on our email list by chance?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so Facebook is the best because that's where we post every time there's any kind of public event, and our website. But Facebook, if you're on Facebook, that is the best instantaneous way to find out where I'm going to be. But I'll tell you what, if you want to give a note, I've got a number of wonderful staff in the room. If you want to leave a note with one of them.
I've talked to them a few times.
You have? Have you talked to Jen?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll make a promise to you that I come see you in Bloomington, and I'll do so soon, because I'll be back, I promise you that, and we'll make sure you know. But you gotta make sure my staff knows, and we'll contact you in advance. But I want to answer your question more broadly. This is a big district, I think 450-some square miles, 37 or so cities. A lot of candidates, Democratic and Republican in the past, only focus on the ones close by here. I've made it a real point to go to Coon Rapids a number of times, and Brooklyn Park, and Independence, places where Democrats never show up, yet to mention any candidates. And I'm one person, I'm trying my best. And I've spent every waking hour for the last 18 months, every single day, meeting people throughout our district. And if I haven't met you yet, I apologize, because I want to. I assure you that, and I will be to Bloomington a lot more. And should I be elected and have the honor of serving you, I've already committed to doing at least one open, accessible, free town hall, public town hall, every 90 days in different parts of the district, as long as I serve in Congress. Which is let's see, can you clarify your position on the medical device tax? Paulson has a lot of meetings with folks in the medical device industry. Yeah. I favored the elimination of the medical device tax. It is important to this state and a lot of people that work in that business and a lot of companies. However, and Eric Paulson did so as well, which I actually salute. However, when you eliminate that amount of money that was helping support programs in the ACA, it's appropriate to find an alternative. alternative source of revenue, instead of just doing away with revenue. Anybody who's been in business knows if you eliminate a source of revenue, you're either going to have to cut costs or you're going to have to find a new source. And I don't think that was done. I'm here to represent our state and the people that work in the industries in our state, and I do agree with that, and that's how I feel. A chance to speak with you about children's programs and mental health. Oh, and someone's number. I can follow up with somebody. I'll do so. Whoever wrote this note, I will follow up you directly because I think it's an invitation to do so. I'll make note of it. But as I said, children's programs and mental health. I do want to speak about mental health because I think it affects a lot of the issues that I even spoke about earlier. We are a nation which somehow has undervalued mental health and have not made it at parity with physical health. We have too few programs, too few providers. We have too few insurance programs that provide reimbursement. And it is a significant gap in our national social fabric, if you ask me. And it starts with kids. If kids grow up thinking that mental health is a no-no or it has a stigma attached to it, that becomes a lifelong challenge. And I can't imagine there's anybody in this room, myself included, that hasn't been touched by mental health issues in a family. And that is a issue that isn't Republican or Democrat, it is simply human. And it's only getting worse because we live in an age in which stresses are significant. And I'm afraid that we have kids growing up with great disadvantages if we simply don't provide simple services when they're young. So it is a hallmark of my service, and I intend to be a vocal advocate. Repairing government. It seems daunting, even overwhelming. How would you begin? How will you measure progress? Well, I'll tell you. I think that repairing government starts with, in rooms like this, and having conversation. I think it starts by going to Congress and hosting 20 Republicans around my dinner table to introduce ourselves and get to know one another. Because there's not a single mechanism in St. Paul or in Washington, D.C. that encourages members of different parties to come together. In fact, just the opposite. Leaders of both parties would prefer that you stay apart. Which is one reason I co-founded a program in Minnesota called MN-01, which my family foundation and I financed 2 Democratic members of our state legislature and 2 Republican members to come together into a program called Studio E 4 times a year. They get to know each other along with a number of other people in our community, and they know each other's life stories. And as a result of MN-01, we've had legislation co-sponsored by Democrats and Republicans that has actually passed for the simple reason they got to know each other. So repairing government isn't something that can be done overnight or by one person, but I'd like to inspire it. And I think in a body of 435 people, I can make a difference. And making a difference means probably working around the party leadership, because that's how it begins. But at the end of the day, there's a lot more power in this room than there is by one member of Congress. Because if we demand people going to Congress who are willing to work together and put people above party, that's how it changes. And I know that government repair truck I drive around probably has to be a lot bigger, but I'll tell you, I believe it's possible. And measuring success will be much more about how we feel as a country in the beginning than something measurable or quantitative. But I think change is coming, and I think what we're going to see beginning on November 6th, and I hope again in 2020, with people finally engaged, young people in this country in particular, I feel very optimistic, and I just ask that you start supporting candidates, Democrats and Republicans, that have the same principles in mind. Were you going to ask that? Yeah.
Yeah. So repairing government, I think that's campaign reform, and all of the money that's coming in from special interest. How do you make a change when you've got people that make the change actually receiving that money?
Thank you. So repairing government also starts with exactly what you talked about. So a few points on that. I would be the only member of Congress that disavows all that money, so I know I'd probably be a lonely voice. The only people that don't want to affect campaign finance reform right now are 435 people in Congress, I think. But I'm going to inspire that. I've already had conversations with some prominent people in the Congress that are like-minded, that are ready to hit the ground running. And I believe it's going to change with a Democratic flipping of the House. I'm going to be this most vocal advocate for making that a core element of the Democratic Party platform and encouraging the Republicans to do exactly the same thing. I think by exposing truth, by all of you going home when you have a chance and going on opensecrets.org and looking at where money flows into campaigns, where it comes from, that's a beginning. I believe we need new transparency rules. I believe Even though ending Citizens United would take a constitutional amendment, it is something I think we should put on the radar screen and start working towards. And it also means we have to repair our government by engaging people. When 40-some% of this country chooses not to vote in a consequential election like 2016, we've got a problem. And I want to make our voting day a national holiday. I think that the fact that we are one of the rare democracies that doesn't do so restricts how many people can vote. I just met with a number of teachers right down the street at Groveland School, here in Minnetonka, that told me, that reminded me actually, that a survey by Edmund indicated that only 40% of teachers voted in the 2016 presidential election. And at first I was appalled because I thought, the most influential profession in our state, if they're voting at that low level, we have big problems. But then I listened and I came to realize that a lot of teachers have to get to school awfully early, sometimes when polls are opening or even beforehand. They work long days, they often have to stay after school for activities or coaching or taking care of students, and then have to get home sometimes to take care of themselves or family, and oftentimes simply can't get to the polls. So it got me thinking, why don't we just set aside a day? We already have national holidays, why not take the most important, set it aside to encourage participation? How about something simple like that? It doesn't cost anything, and how could a Republican or a Democrat Those are the simple solutions that I think start preparing our government, but it starts with preparing ourselves and our communities first, and I think that's how we begin. Let me keep going through the questions, and I'd love to get to some of your raised hands. I already answered. Thanks for being willing to take on this challenge. Well, thank you. I'm going to hold on to this one in my pocket. I got to tell you, A, it's a responsibility, but B, it's the most fun I've ever had. And I want to encourage others to undertake this kind of pursuit because it's important. And if we make it so mean-spirited and atrocious as it is for so many, we are simply excluding a lot of the most talented and wonderful people in this country from even getting a shot. So I want to show people you can have fun and get it done. We're starting to see misleading negative ads. Oh, really? How do you plan to respond? Do you go low or stay high? Well, I've seen those ads too. And I found it really interesting that a man who just joined the Congressional Civility Caucus would stoop as low as to put his name on an ad that looks like the one he's got out right now, that it would come out, strangely enough, on the same day that a super PAC affiliated with his campaign comes out with basically the same ad, saying the same things. But what's really, other than being mean-spirited and going low, what really bothers me is that it's not true. It's a lie. And if our members of Congress are disseminating lies, in addition to the White House, that's simply embodying, that's a bigger problem. And just to answer these very directly, at Penny's we do provide health insurance coverage to our full-time employees. We pay 50% of the premiums for those that elect to participate. When I was interviewed right after we'd opened our first shop, Penny's shop, by the Star Tribune, I think, and it was maybe Forbes magazine, the only full-time employees we really had were the 3 partners that got the business going. I already bought my own health care in the individual market. One of my partners had it through his wife's business, and the third partner had it through his own business. Once we had full-time employees, yes, we created a plan. It's the only way to do it. So it really bothers me that he is spending millions of dollars lying to people. And that's how we've always done it. Phillips Distilling, Talenti Gelato, my family foundation, my own campaign provides health coverage to every single full-time staffer that we have. So that bothers me. You can imagine. I think they portrayed me as someone who avoids paying his taxes. Well, I do pay my taxes. In fact, a lot of them. And the ad, in fact, we had to do a freeze frame on the ad to identify what the heck they're talking about, because I've always paid my taxes. And apparently in the small, tiny print that none of you would ever see, of course, because they don't want you to, in 2012 and 13, apparently our Talenti Gelato business paid our property tax bill on one of our ice cream plants in Marietta, Georgia, a little bit late, and we incurred an $89 late payment interest charge. So I apologize. I'm not a tax scofflaw, but that's how far this member of Congress has stooped. And it deeply disappoints me. The second part of the question is, how am I going to respond? I'm going to respond with truth and optimism, and I'm going to take the high road. But I'm going to do it aggressively. Because when someone lies, it bothers me, but when a member of Congress lies and intentionally misleads the people that he intends to represent, That's where I draw the line. So I will respond, but I want you to know the truth so that you can respond. Because I will never, ever put my name on an ad that intentionally misleads anybody. And if I ever do, I hope you will be the first people to call me out. Oh, good. Minnesota Way Pledge sign, thank you. When will you be debating Eric Paulson again? And is former President Obama going to campaign for him? I've been hoping and inviting and making myself available to debate Eric Paulson as many times as possible. You might know that he agreed to one, which was a $60 per plate affair hosted by the Chamber of Commerce. Did anybody watch that debate? What did you think? Good.
Did a great job.
Thank you. That was my first one since 9th grade, so thank you. You know, and I do believe we are going to schedule at least 2 more. I think one hosted by KSTP on television, another by either TPT or NPR. And that's great. I'll do as many as possible. I love debating the issues. I think we should do a lot more of it. What I want to see is gatherings like this, where 2 candidates appeared side by side at a table, where all of you can ask a question of both of us. Wouldn't it be nice if every question in this bucket would be the responsibility to respond to by both candidates? Yeah. It's as simple as that. We've been inviting him time and time again to do these events. He does not acknowledge our invitations. Instead, he issues a press release calling on me, challenging me to do public forums. But in the fine print, he wants them to be ticketed, with 50% of the tickets issued to each campaign to distribute it. And our contention is, that is antithetical to the entire reason to do them, which is there's a third of this district that is not affiliated with either party, certainly not affiliated with either campaign. And how in the heck are they going to come and get the answers and have questions posed to the candidates? So that's the difference between him and I. I hope that we will have more. I think it's a responsibility to have more. The League of Women Voters has invited both of us to do a public forum together that they would moderate to ensure that it's civil and decent, which I know it would anyway. And he's not even responded to their invitation. So. Again, the power's in your hands. If you think it's important to do so, I ask that you contact his office or contact those in this community that have some influence and try to encourage it. His former I'm sorry?
His voicemail always full, you know that.
His voicemail's always full, I'm so surprised. Is former President Obama going to campaign for me? Well, I have not spoken with anybody to campaign for me. I think I would be honored if he chose to do so. He's a person who won this district twice. If anybody of you saw his speech the other night, I found it to be another example of what makes him remarkable. And his eulogy at John McCain's funeral, another reason. Regardless of what one thinks about his policies or his legacy, he's a man of decency, of compassion, of principle, and boy, we need more of that. So I'd be honored if you would choose to come here. Yes. How can I let people know about Paulson's lousy performance without running negative ads? This is the easiest question I can answer. Look at his voting record. One of the great challenges in this day and age is that members of Congress have publicly available voting records. The problem is that a lot of people don't choose not to investigate them. The good news is this, though. Eric Paulson's brand has appropriately diminished considerably in the last couple of years, because he is a man who doesn't show up in front of people, and that's a fact. He's a man who votes differently than he talks. That's a fact. He's a man who's the 6th biggest taker of special interest money in politics, in the Congress. That's a fact. So I'm on a mission every day. I talk to people, I listen, learn, and I tell the truth. I will not run mean-spirited ads. I will certainly run ads that expose the truth. That he's a man hard to reach, and he's a man whose votes don't match his quotes. But once again, I'm going to keep saying the same thing. There's a lot more power in human-to-human contact and advocacy than there is in any television ad, and I'm a big believer in that. So I would love and be very honored if all of you might help me promote the truth. You said in the debate that you wouldn't support Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. Please elaborate. I think it's time for new leadership on both sides of the aisle. It's as simple as that. I think Leader Pelosi, she has served the Democratic Party for many years, and I think in a very honorable way. However, I think her leadership is compromised. I see no way that if she were elected Speaker of the House, that she could lead the House. In fact, just the opposite. I think there are a lot of talented people on both sides of the aisle that should have a chance to serve in that role. I do hope and believe that the House will flip to Democratic control, and I hope the next Speaker of the House is someone who speaks for the House, not just for a party, because that's why we're in the position that we are right now. And I very much favor the possibility of someone leading in a way that resembles how Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan worked together, which is, again, it's kindergarten lessons. You know, everybody wins when everybody wins, and I'm simply in favor of new leadership on both sides. That is the fundamental reason why I don't take money from members of Congress. Because, of course, there's a quid pro quo when a member of Congress sends you a big check and then taps you on the shoulder when it comes time to electing leadership, and they remind you. I would be the only one that goes there in January of 2019 if I have that honor, who doesn't have the responsibility to anybody in that chamber, instead only to the people that sent me there, and that's a big difference. What will you commit to after you're elected in terms of town halls and open forums? As I just said, I think earlier, I've already committed to at least an open, free, accessible town hall format at least once every quarter around the district, so that we can make sure that everybody has a chance to ask me questions, to challenge me, and even if they want to yell and scream at me. You know, thank goodness we live in a country where not only is that a possibility, it's encouraged sometimes. So yes, I will do it. And open forum, same thing. The fact that it's not a basic expectation really surprises me. So I love being in front of all of you and with you. What is it about you that makes you the best candidate? Well, you know, I think that's for you to decide. I've got your best interests in mind. You know, I'm a father of 2 remarkable daughters who I feel a responsibility to leave this community and this country and this globe better than we found it. I grew up in a Minnesota that celebrated collaboration between members of both parties. In fact, in the last 10 days, I've spent time with former Governor Arnie Carlson, a Republican, who was supporting this campaign. I spent time with former Republican Senator Dave Durenberger, who was supporting this campaign. I've spent time with former Vice President Walter Mondale, you know, whose legacy is quite remarkable. And I spend time with these people because they represented an era in this state in which people collaborated. And I think we have to, when I think about making America great again, that's the greatness that I aspire to. When people served together with different perspectives, celebrated those differences, and got things done. And I come from that Minnesota, like many of you in this room do. And I'm not saying that alone makes me the better candidate. I think what makes me the better candidate is the simple truth that I will be independent. I'm not reliant on special interests and lobbyists and corporations or unions to finance my campaigns. And my opponent has been doing this for the better part of 25 years. That's what he does. He's a career politician. And I don't mean that in a mean way, it's just the truth. I'm not going to Washington, if I have that honor, because I needed a new career. And that's a difference. And that's for you to decide if that's something that you find important. But I think service in the U.S. Congress should be something not perpetual, but occasional. And I think it's healthy to have an institution see new leadership and new ideas come in and out. And I want to encourage that. And that's why perpetual incumbency troubles me, and that's why I think if we have got to affect campaign finance reform, and somehow, some way, if not, we can't do that, then I think we have some need for term limits, so that we do not have people there for the better part of 30 years in many cases. And that's what I think makes me a different candidate, but I'll leave the rest up to you if you think that makes me a better candidate. Is it true that you don't offer your employees health care? It is not true. I do offer our employees health care. I offer our campaign staffers health care. We offer Penny's employees health care. We offer our Family Foundation employees health care. At Phillips Distilling, we offered health care. And at Talenti Gelato, we offered health care. I would never, ever, ever start, manage, or operate a business that didn't offer a health care plan to our full-time employees. I think this country needs to start turning attention to part-time employees who right now don't have many options. That's how I feel. And I think it's shameful that a U.S. congressman who has never started a business or operated a business would have the audacity and the gall to challenge someone who does create jobs and does try to help people and does share and does want the best for people. Instead, this is a man who votes to take 20 million people off of their health care. So that's my answer to that question. there are a couple of questions that are the same ones, so I'm just setting them down. That one was the same one. These negative ads, by Paulson, can you defend yourself? So I hope I did. What would you do to make sure country comes before party in Congress? I'll tell you, I watched, did anybody watch John McCain on the Senate floor when he came in to take that no vote on? Yeah.
Yes.
That, what troubles me is that shouldn't be a remarkable moment. But it's the fact that we remember it as a remarkable moment that indicates everything that's wrong with Congress. It's a constitutional responsibility, it's an ethical duty when you take the oath of office to represent people, not party. I think it's as George Washington feared when he wrote his farewell address. He feared that parties would put a stranglehold on our democratic republic. He actually feared that foreign influence would find its way in. Strangely enough, here we go. So again, the beauty of our system and of our Constitution and our system of governance is that every 2 years you can throw them out. And I make the pledge to you, a darn important one, that I will always put people above party. I will not be the most popular member of the Democratic Party because I do see times that I will disagree probably with the leaders of the Democratic Party, particularly when they want to oppose something simply because it wasn't their idea. And when both sides do that, we are in big trouble. So that's what makes the difference for me. I'm doing this to show that you can represent an entire district. And we have the responsibility to do so, and that's what makes me excited. Are you in support of Medicare for all or a one-payer system, a single-payer system? I am in support of every American having health care when they need it. We are too wealthy of a country, too successful, too smart, too innovative, too prosperous to do anything differently. I can't sleep well at night knowing that there are children who are hungry, that there are people suffering, that there are people who have health care issues that are choosing not to buy their medicines or not going to the doctor because they can't afford it. And it bothers me deeply. And we can do better. I think the best way to get there is to ensure that we have multiple options available. So that's why I'm in favor of expanding Medicare as a buy-in option for everybody and letting people keep a plan that works for them. What I care about is ensuring that everybody has the care when they need it. And right now, I served as the chairman of the board of the Allina Health System that operates all the Allina clinics and centers, Abbott Northwestern and Sister Kenny and the Phillips Eye Institute and the like. And I've got an inside look at what's wrong with how the system operates. I know how much it costs to provide care. I know how many people use the emergency room as their first source of care. And if you ever wanted to know, like I used to want to know, why do emergency rooms look so atrocious? Why is the lighting so bad and the carpet so ugly and the magazine so old? It's because, and why do all the new buildings look so shiny? It's because that's the highest cost of care, and that's where most people go who don't have health insurance. So right now, we are all paying for it, and that's why it costs us so much. If we would simply ensure that everybody had access to care through a thoughtful national program that was an option to buy into, and that we made sure to take care of people who can't on their own, we'd be a better country, a more prosperous country. So that's what I want to see. I think there's one more, and we got about 10 minutes left. I think there was one question I left unanswered, and I want to make sure to get to it. Is there any questions that you have on? Oh, yeah, here it is. Oh, do I have a view on the current farm bill and the SNAP work requirements? Yeah, work requirements are interesting because I'm someone who believes in self-sufficiency, and I'm also someone who believes, I don't like freeloaders. I don't like people who who have the physical ability to work and receive things for free on our dime. I don't think that's fair. But we have to recognize that we can't have a one-size-fits-all policy, because I just talked to a woman last week who said, you would never know it in the job numbers and employment numbers, but I spend more hours taking care of my elderly parents because I'm their only caregiver. You never know that from the employment numbers. So if we force people, if we force work requirements on everybody, there would be millions of people probably in this country who are working. They're just not being paid. And that's a big difference. So I do believe in a country that certainly encourages those who have the ability to do so to work for their pay or for their benefits. but we have to be cognizant of the fact that there are a lot of people who don't show up in the numbers. They're human beings that have challenges and responsibilities that we should impose on them. So a thoughtful government looks at that as truth. And so when it comes to the SNAP program, I want our children to have food. That's what I think is the most important. And that's what makes this country a remarkable country in our ability to solve these problems. The fact that we haven't yet only means it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And that's what I want to be part of. I want to be part of the solution. So now I think I've answered every question. And just to show you that I'm answering I'd love to hear, we got about 5 minutes left. I'd love to hear a few questions. Please, sir.
Before my question, I want to say I'm happy you're running. I think you're going to win.
Thank you.
You deserve to win. And I thought Hillary was going to win too.
You and Donald Trump. Well, thank you.
But my question is, I have a friend in Seattle, and she was talking about like a phone bank, to use a text bank, and with people's phones these days, I think that's the way to connect. You may already be doing that, but
Yes.
it's not good.
Yes, thank you for, I demanded, when I decided to run for Congress, I demanded of everybody who was going to work on this effort that we do things differently, that we combine the best of tradition with the best of innovation. And we've done that. We're using a lot of traditional mechanisms, good old-fashioned pounding the pavement, human-to-human contact that I do every day and I love. But we combine that with some of the most innovative and extraordinary digital tactics because people don't answer their landlines anymore. They do look at their phones, in fact, all day long in many cases. And that is how we communicate in this day and age. We have television screens, we have small screens, we have doors, we have phones, and text messaging and emails. And we're using every single mechanism, but not necessarily to persuade, but to have conversations and to listen. Because the foremost duty that I have is to hear what's important to people. So when I go to Congress, and I have that honor, I hope, I know what people want. And I'd like to find a way, when I do serve in Congress, hopefully, to use technology to understand what is important to people. Because that makes representation more efficient and more effective by knowing what people care about. So we are doing so, and if you have ideas in this room about how we can amplify some of these efforts, boy, I'm all ears. Because I really want to do this in a way that might change the game forever and show people how thoughtful campaigning can be done. Yes? Oh, yes, you did have your hand up, ma'am, and you've been waiting very patiently.
Just in a few words, could you tell me why this terrible thing happened, that the children are separated from their parents?
Yeah, I can't explain why it happened. I can tell you that as a 49-year-old American, I don't recall reading or hearing about anything that my country had done that made me more ashamed in my entire life. And there's no excuse in my estimation about why we did so. The kids that were separated from their parents will be traumatized their entire lives, whether they end up in this country or somewhere else. And for our nation to propagate that and have a role in that is shameful, regardless of party. I cannot explain why it happened. All I can tell you is that if I was a member of Congress and I was aware of that happening, I would have elevated that immediately and I would have camped out at the fence of the White House until somebody took action. It shouldn't take, but thank goodness we have a media in this country. I know our president is trying to diminish and demean journalists and newspapers, but everything that comes to light, comes to light because somebody's reporting it to us, thank goodness. If we relied only on the White House, no matter who controls it, I'm afraid we wouldn't know things like this, and I think it happens a lot more than we think. I want a more compassionate Congress and a more compassionate country, and I think we're on the way. Two more questions. How about in the back of the? Yes, sir. Nice to see you, by the way.
Good to see you. When I first say, I've never been engaged in campaign activities before, never volunteered, never phone bank, never had signs in my yard, never done a parade, and this time I am.
I love it. Thank you.
Two people have inspired me to do that. One of them was Donald Trump, the other was you. Well, guys, I'm sorry, but you've inspired me in very different ways. I love everything you said, and I appreciate your positions, your passion, your energy, your enthusiasm, your commitment, all of that. when it comes to being in Congress, we all know the system and the processes that are set up don't naturally afford the opportunity to a freshman in Congress, a congressman or congresswoman, to really influence something. If you can come back here to run for re-election 2 years from now, because you are going to win, what would be the two things you would hold up as your promised accomplishments, that these are the two things you were able to influence and get done?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, by the way. And you shouldn't be embarrassed or ashamed by what you just said at all. In fact, I honor that, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm glad you voted and cared, because there are too many people that don't do any of that, so it means a lot to me.
Can I ask a question to clarify?
Yeah.
Did you vote for Trump, or did you, because of him?
No, I will tell you that, no, I did not.
Darn, I thought. No, but
I could say, I might have voted for a Republican, but not Trump. I may have, if there was a different path.
So I'll tell you, should I have the honor of serving all of you in Congress, there are two things that I hope to accomplish. One is what I consider to be a clear and present issue and danger, which is providing a check on the executive branch, plain and simple. We don't have don't confuse that with obstruction at all. It's not about obstruction. It is about providing a check and balance that our Constitution demands. And it is not in this nation's best interest when one party controls, in this case, 3 branches of government. So that's my first, providing that check. And secondly, campaign finance reform. I will elevate somehow, some way, no matter what my committee assignment, I will have a platform to expose the truth, to elevate the corruption, and start doing something about it. And there is a group of 48 Democrats and Republicans, 24 of each, that are part of a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus in Congress. You wouldn't know much about them because the leadership in both parties would prefer you don't, because they're trying to do things that we all want to get done, which is provide thoughtful solutions to our problems. And I want to join that caucus, and I want to make sure we have enough people where we could actually affect the outcome of legislation by voting as a block of Democrats and Republicans. Can you imagine such a thing? That's what we're going to do, and I want to be somebody that plays a role in that. I can't make a promise. You have your politicians, I voted for a bunch of them that make these big promises and then we're always disappointed. The only promise I can make to you and I can absolutely hold is I am going to work my tail off to those ends. That's my promise. Someone's got a great question. One last question. Yes?
You talked earlier about voter engagement and making sure people have information and get to go to the polls. But I want to touch on that. There are a lot of people who have been convicted of crimes, who have lost their right to vote, even after serving the country's state and getting off the vote. And there is research that people who've been granted the right to vote are less likely to recommit a crime because they feel more connected to their communities. And I was wondering if you would support legislation to restore voting rights to people with criminal records.
Yeah, I believe that we are a nation of second chances. That is part of America's promise, I believe. I think someone who's committed a crime that has served his or her time and paid that price, which is often a very steep one, I do believe they should have their voting rights reinstated. I do believe that. I think that's the America that I do believe in. And I think, as we all well know, there are a lot of people out there who are committing crimes that are abhorrent, affecting a lot more people that are able to vote every single day and haven't paid the price. And I'm sick of it. That's one reason I want to go to Congress. Just because you wear a white collar and you commit the same acts that hurt thousands, if not millions of people, you should pay the steepest price that you should possibly pay. And I think anybody who serves their time should have a second chance. At least a second chance. Maybe not a third, but a second chance. Thank you, everybody. I want to... I mean this really in a heartfelt way. Your time is really valuable, and the fact that you would share it with me tonight is really, really awesome. And I use that word irregularly because I've never felt what I feel right now as I see people with the same hopefulness and optimism, and most importantly, energy to engage. And I want to thank you, not just on behalf of this candidate and our campaign, but on behalf of our country, because this is happening all over the country right now. And I never have ever seen rooms like this, and many are saying I've never seen participation like this, and I want to say thank you, because we got a wake-up call. Thank you, yes. We got a wake-up call in 2016. We will not be judged by the outcome of that election and what has happened since, but we surely will be judged by what happens on November 6th, because we have all the information we need to make a thoughtful decision. And to that end, as you know, my campaign slogan and ethos is everyone's invited. And on September 15th, we're having what I hope will be the biggest picnic in 3rd District history, to which everyone's invited. I want everyone who wants to come and have some fun with family and friends. We've got some great musical acts that you're going to really dig coming, games, I think we have noon yoga, we're going to have food, but most of all, it's just people coming together from different perspectives, having a nice afternoon together. And that's what this campaign is all about. I'd love to see more of you. Godspeed, and thank you so much. And let's please commit to vote on November 6th, no matter who you vote for.